I'll be reading in 30 seconds. All right. It's the 183rd day of the year. Thanks for joining us. Today's workbook lesson 183. I call upon God's name and my own. All right. Getting into it. And can you turn that music down just a touch, sweetie? Thank you. All right. Lesson 183. I call upon God's name and on my own. God's name is holy, but no holier than your name. To call upon God's name is to but call upon your own name. A father gives his son his name, and thus identifies the son with the father. His brothers share their father's name, and thus they are united in a bond to which they turn for their identity. Your father's name reminds you of who you are, even within a world that does not know that you are God's son, even though you have not remembered that you and your brothers are all God's one son. God's name cannot be heard without response, nor said without an echo in the mind of your higher self that calls you to remember. Say God's name, and you invite the angels to surround the ground on which you stand, and sing to you as the angels spread out their wings to keep you safe and shelter you from every worldly thought that would intrude upon your holiness. Repeat God's name, and all the world responds by laying down illusions. Every dream the world holds dear has suddenly gone by. Where the illusion seemed to stand, you find a star, a miracle of grace. The sick arise, healed of their sickly thoughts. The blind can see, the deaf can hear. The sorrowful cast off their mourning, and the tears of pain are dried as happy laughter comes to bless the world. Repeat the name of God, and the little names have lost their meaning. No temptation but becomes a nameless and unwanted thing before God's name. Repeat God's name and see how easily you will forget the names of all the gods you valued. That's little g gods. What your ego had valued has lost the name of God you gave them. What your ego had valued becomes anonymous and valueless to you. Although before you let the name of God replace their little names, you stood before what your ego valued worshipfully, naming them as gods. Repeat the name of God and call upon your higher self, whose name is God's name. Repeat God's name, and all the tiny, nameless things on earth slip into right perspective. Those who call upon the name of God cannot mistake the nameless for the name, nor sin for grace, nor bodies for the Holy Son of God. And should you join a brother, as you sit with him in silence, repeat God's name along with him within your quiet mind. You have established there an altar to which reaches to God himself and to his Son. Practice but this today. Repeat God's name slowly, again and still again. Become oblivious to every name but God's name. Hear nothing else. Let all your thoughts become anchored on God's name. No other word we use, except at the beginning when we say the idea that I call upon God's name and my own but once. And then God's name becomes our only thought, our only word, the only thing that occupies our minds, the only wish we have, the only sound with any meaning, and the only name of everything that we desire to see, everything we would call our own. By calling upon God's name, thus do we give an invitation which could never be refused, and God's will come and answer your call himself. Think not, God hears the little prayers of those who call on God with names of idols cherished by the world. They who pray to the idols of the egoic world cannot reach God thus. God cannot hear requests that God be not himself, or that his Son receive another name other than God's name. So repeat God's name and acknowledge God as sole creator of reality. And then you acknowledge also that his Son is a part of God, creating in God's name. Sit silently and let God's name become the all-encompassing idea that holds your mind completely. Let all thoughts be still, except this one, that I call on God's name. And to all other thoughts, respond with repeating God's name and seeing God's name replace the 1,000 little names you gave your thoughts. Not realizing that there's one name for all that is and all that there will be, for God is the sole creator of reality. Today, you can achieve a state in which you will experience the gift of grace. You can escape all bondage of the world and give the world the same release you found. You can remember what the world forgot and offer the world your own, remembering that there is only God's name, for God is the sole creator of reality. You can accept today the part you play in the world's salvation and in your own salvation as well. And both can be accomplished perfectly. Turn to the name of God for your release, and your release is given you. No prayer, but the calling upon God's name is necessary, for God's name holds all prayers within it. Worlds are insignificant, and all requests unheeded when God's Son calls on his Father's name. His Father's thought becomes the Son's own thoughts. God's Son makes his claim to all his Father gave, is giving still, and will forever give. God's Son calls on his Father to let all things the Son thought he egoically made by his little s self be nameless now, and in their place the holy name of God becomes his judgment of their worthlessness. All little things are silent, little sounds sound less now. The little things of earth that your little self imagined have disappeared. The universe consists of nothing but the Son of God, who calls upon his Father, and his Father's voice gives answer in his Father's holy name. In this eternal, still relationship, in which communication far transcends all words and yet exceeds in depth and height whatever words could possibly convey, is peace eternal. In our Father's name, we would experience this peace today. And in God's name, the peace of God shall be given us.
Oh my God.
And that's the lesson. And here are the notes. And Tom, I don't know if we coordinated, but I was hoping you would do the meditation after the notes. Fandiddly-tastic. All right, 183, thank you. I call upon God's name and my own, and Tom's once in a while, and my dad's and Adriana. I call upon God's name and on my own. Sanskrit is the ancient literary language of India. Sanskrit traces its origins to the 4th century BC. Sanskrit is very important in the origin and development of comparative Indo-European languages of our time. Sanskrit has been described as the language of God because in its original form, it recognizes and acknowledges the reality of God in all things. How does Sanskrit do this? Every word is actually a reference to another name for God. Here is a simplified example. If we were to consider the Sanskrit word for horse, the literal translation would actually be the God in nature appearing in the form of a horse. The word for running would translate into the God nature participating in the act of running. Everything references back to the idea that God is in all things and that there is nothing that is separate or distinct from God. Our modern language has forgotten that God is in all things. Modern language is now used to distinguish one part of the whole from another. Modern languages confirm our belief in separation, ignoring the interdependence and true relationship of each part to the whole. Modern language looks upon the parts as autonomous, separate entities that can change or affect another part of the whole. In Lesson 169, we defined the term oneness as simply the idea of God, and knowing God encompasses all things, and that there is nothing outside of the one self. There is no mind that's aware of anything that is not itself, and all minds have united with its source, and are therefore like its source. There's no judgment, since there's nothing outside the one self to judge. This lesson I call upon God's name and my own. In this lesson, I call upon God's name and my own is the recognition that oneness. In this lesson is the recognition of that oneness. I'm sorry, I stumbled on that one too many times. Our name and God's name are interchangeable and the same. They are equally holy because we are inseparable from our source. Our Father's name reminds us of who we are. Creation is the extension, and the Father gives his name and identity to his Son in totality. Nothing is held back. God identifies himself with his creations. and his creations share that one common identity. The Father's name and the Son's name reflect the true nature of our higher self, each being equally holy, since they are the same. In time, the Father's name helps us remember our true identity. By repeating God's name, we acknowledge as the sole creator of reality. We acknowledge God as the sole creator of reality, that is. We are part of that reality. When we call on God's name, we are co-creating with God. Similar to ancient Sanskrit, God is the name for all things, and all thoughts for God are the one self. When you use God's name exclusively, you will see God everywhere, and God will answer your call, for you are only asking God to be himself. In God's name reminds us of our true identity, for God is love and truth. In God's name, all illusions of egoic littleness disappear, and peace is restored and given. Here's our question of the day. Namaste is an Indian term that is loosely translated as the God in me recognizes the God in you. It's often used as a greeting of acknowledgement of another's presence, or when leaving that person's presence. If you were to begin or end your conversation with namaste instead of hello or I'm going to stay, no, goodbye, would that term better help remind you of your connectedness to God and the oneness of all things? I only have to say, namaste. Thank you, Tom.
Okay. So today, this lesson, it says, I call upon God's name and my own name. It's trying to recognize the oneness. And if you're, although this isn't a class on manifestation, but one of the things that manifestation often will recognize is the power of intention, the power of words, power of the written word, the power of the spoken word. So, an affirmation, for example, that I am happy, healthy, and abundant, if I think that, that's, I'm going to say, one level of energy. If I write that down, that becomes more powerful or a higher level. If I speak it, then that becomes another level of power. Uh, because words have a vibrational tone, they have a energy reflected in it. Uh, when it says, I call upon the God nature or the name of God as my own, uh, what and they use the word God, whatever is something, however you perceive God, be it a higher power, energy, love, truth, Buddha, uh, Allah, Muhammad, uh, you know, whatever gets your attention to thinking and realizing that there's a spiritual essence, and that spiritual essence is you. That's bringing you into the awareness of this connectiveness, that you're a spiritual being, that, as they mentioned in a earlier lesson a couple days ago, that this is not my home, that you're a spiritual, you're light, having an experience of the limitation that comes with the physical form, and that you are truly light. So today, what we want to do is we want to realize that and recognize this spiritual essence. And one of our objectives here in time and space is to not mistake the game token we call the body to be our true reality. So the word namaste is this idea that the God in me recognizes the God in you. Sanskrit says that when I call your name, it's the God nature acting as Roy. It's the God nature acting as Lee, Adriana, Bob, your name. And that is to help us recognize that it's not the actor that we wish to uh, place our focus our attention. It's not the costume that they're wearing. It's that nature of what we are. So let us just go within today and become aware of that God is and you are part of that one indivisible self. And when we speak of, use the name of God or something, whatever that is, whatever helps you resonate with that truth, that oneness. You could call it light, you could call it energy, uh, universal cosmic consciousness, whatever makes you comfortable. But if we look at the religious names for God, especially if we look at the various names, they all tend to have a lot of same vibrational tone. Yahweh, that they all have similar type things, Brahman. These are all names that have that vibration. So, uh, with that in mind, why don't you just become aware of your being, your light, your energy, your essence, your spirit, and just breathe in the light that surrounds you, that permeates you, that is you, that God force. For God is another name for truth. God is that life force that animates your mind that you share. So breathe in the name of God and extend that same name out to your world. Breathe in the name of God and extend out your name, for your name and God's name are one name. Breathe in the love of God and breathe out the God nature, being that breath, that energy, that light. Breathe in the God nature. Extend that same nature of God. Breathe in the name of God and realize that that nature is you. God, your name, your sister's name, your brother's name are all the nature of God acting out in a costume that we observe as the cat, the dog, the rock, all animated by the thought of God. Just continue to silently or in your own way, and you can speak it out loud. Use that voice, whatever you call God, and just breathe that in and resonate with it, vibrate with it, emanate it out, for that is what you are. The God nature being you, being love in form. For the God nature is only love, for only love is real. I call on the name of God and my own name. I call on the name of God and the name of all I see, for they are the God nature. They are part of that one. Breathe in the nature of God. I resonate that nature. I vibrate like a tuning fork. God, the name of God. That is my vibration. That is my essence, my light, my connectiveness with the truth. I call on the name of God and I extend that to my world, the rock, the dog, my house, the chair. They're all the nature, the God nature acting as the chair. I see a child running. That is the God nature acting as running, performing, running. That child is the God nature acting as the child. God is in all things. The vision of Christ is the ability to see past the costume, the body, the action, the role that someone is playing, and look past that and recognize the God nature in that actor. Today, I will not mistake the role that the rock, the dog, the person next to me, my coworker, I will not mistake their role for what they truly are. Light, essence, spirit, an individuated aspect of consciousness playing a role on this game board of time and space to allow me, as I allow them, to reawaken to the truth of their nature. They are not the rock. They are not the dog. They are not my coworker. They are God's nature acting as in the role of a rock, a dog, a coworker. I call on the name of God and my own name. For when I say my name, that is synonymous with God because I am part of that one self, perfect, whole, and complete, part of the inseparable one coin. God, Creator, you, the rock, the dog, the cat, Lee, your coworker, the effect, two sides of one inseparable coin. call on the name of God and my own, and I recognize the truth that we are not this game token, the body. We are spirit. We are light. And when I look upon the rock, the flower, the child, I will not mistake the game token, the physical body, for the truth of what they really are, part of the inseparable oneness of all that is. Today, as decision makers, let's place our attention in recognizing the God nature acting out as individuated aspect of that one self. Let us not mistake the role that we as actors take on to play on this game of reawakening to the truth of what we really are. We reclaim our divine birthright as we call upon the name of God and remember that we are that same nature. You are light, energy, individuated consciousness, inseparable part of the oneness that is the mind of God. I call on the name of God and I call on all my words to remember the truth that as I see the car driving, the God nature acting as the car, God is all there is. The truth is, there is nobody to fix. There is nobody to change. There is nothing to correct, nothing to protect, nothing to impress. There is nothing. There is nobody. God is, and you are that one. I call on the name of God, and I call on my own, and I realize that words help me communicate, that the body is a neutral communication device, that we take on a costume so that we can learn how to minimize our fear, control it, manage it, and eliminate it, and demonstrate what love would have me do. Grace is the ability to see the love of God in a world of seeming hate and fear. Today I breathe in the grace as I call on the name of God. Grace fills me, for grace is a part. I call on the name of God and I accept that true nature as my own. And as you have decided, made that intention to see with the eyes of Christ, to look past the body form and to realize the truth that in this dimension of time and space, we're all actors, and it's the God nature that is actually activating and helping us all reawaken to that truth. As you become more aware of the breath, reconnect with the game token we call the body. And realize as we reconnect to that body, send that energy because you as individuated consciousness are able to focus or move energy and animate your work. And as you move that energy through the body, as it circulates through, it reaches the soles of the feet, just send a lightning bolt down and reground yourself to this time-space continuum, knowing that today you will be the light that lights your world. Namaste. The God in me recognizes the God in you. When you feel connected, just take a deep breath and open your eyes. Thank you. Just wanted to say in regards to this lesson that words have power, and modern language is trying to separate us. And language itself, one of the things they say, uh, when you label me, you limit me. And I'll just give you, I realized this fairly early in my life. And at age 22, and my purpose was always not to come back here, I wanted to use language to help me remember my purpose, my function, what I was here for. And I decided that I would change my name so that when my name was spoken, it would remind me of what my purpose was. And, I didn't want to have some strange name. So what I looked at, I wanted to have certain qualities, and I wanted to awaken to the truth of who I was. And I knew that I needed to remain a child, an innocent child. And so being English, I mean, American, the language English, that was awake and child. And so I looked at that and I said, I want some name that will remind me of my purpose, and that I have to remain an innocent child. I have to look with the eyes of wonderment out on my world. So I played around with it, and I didn't want to call it Awake Child. So I dropped the A and became Wake Child. And I know I've dealt with various mystics and stuff over the journey. Sometimes some of them say whenever they hear that name, what they see is they get a vision of a child just slapping their hands in glee and saying, I'm out of here. And so that name has always helped remind me of my purpose, that I didn't want to come back, that I wanted to awaken to the truth. And what's interesting is that Sanskrit, they recognize that oneness. When we say namaste, and you probably heard me at the end often say namaste or create a great day, but that is that recognition of your true identity. And I think that if you had, and some people say, uh, I was leaving, I was at the store, someone said, bless you. And, I said, bless back to them. I didn't say I guess I did say namaste, but I also said bless you. But, you know, that's what we need. We need those touchstones, those reminders of the truth. This lesson asks you to call on that name of God, call on the reminder of what you truly are, so that we don't forget to laugh and mistake the game took for what we truly are. Thank you, and I open it, if anybody else wants to share or comment, uh, feel free. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you, Tom. Wonderful. Go ahead, Papa.
Tom, I have to say that I picked up on the meaning of your name a long time ago. It was just what you said, but it was interesting the way you said it just now, that it's awake child who is awake, and it's and you dropped the A, and that was very cool. And I didn't know that you had done that to your last name. I just thought, well, he was just born this way and meant to be, to have this kind of clarity about things, and brought you into the studies of
It
the
does kind of
occult.
beg the question, though. What was your name originally? I mean, was it Devil or something like that? Was it really, really bad?
Well, I don't know. It's a good question. I don't even know if Tom knows. Um, by the same token, I have enjoyed my last name, which means man in Greek. My father used to say that Andron is a very famous name in Greece. Wherever you go, you'll find it on doors here. All on the front, it's got signs on doors and places referring to where the men's rooms are, and it was my little joke for a long time. That's how famous we are in Greece, and so on. But when I was a little baby, they tried to use my real name that I was born with, which was Samuel Isaac, and I just refused. I have been told now, at the age of 2.5, when they kept trying to get me to say baby, I would always say Bobby, and so then they gave up and they said, all right, we'll just teach him his real name, and that's it. So they would show me the mirror and say, look, it's Sammy or Sam. That's Sam. Say Sam, you're Sam. And I would say, no, I'm Bobby. I'm not Sam. And that was how I picked up my name, Bob, which I've been known by ever since. And the only time that I remember my original real name is when I think of the story I told in the beginning, because I was named after my great-grandfather, Samuel Isaac. And he was a very revered geometry teacher and rabbi in Russia who came here 130 years ago. So it's interesting that we are talking about names. And I got to change my name too. Isn't that interesting? Um, I don't know, maybe others of you have had that kind of experience, and we're just studying about how important a name is. It's very important. Legally, I changed my name to S. Robert Andron when I was about 50 years ago, and I did that because I needed to make a decision for things like my college diploma and stuff like that. So it just became that way. But then I had a lot of fun with S being just an initial. We were in Japan 4 years ago, and with my passport, it just said my first name is S. So when I would leave the boat or get back on the boat, they would always say to me, "Hi, S. How are you doing, S?" I say, I'm doing just fine. How are you? And I've gotten kind of used to that too. It's funny, laugh about it, and we don't forget to laugh, right, Tom? Don't forget to laugh.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you had to do it, but whenever I change